Hey there! Good to have you guys back on the channel. I wanted to give you guys a recap of my entire season and lessons learned, and particularly one thought of mine, which is, can going slower actually make you faster? That's an interesting thing. Or put another way, being lazy, is it sometimes to your advantage? Now, the footage that I have going here is from the pop ride on July 19th. This was 1 week before I did my first crit. Gotten back from vacation, couple 3 weeks before this. Took actually a lot of vacation in June and July, and just trying to get back in shape because I want to be able to race one of the crits here. And you show up, it's like 109. It was like the hottest pop ride of the year. That's why in this footage right here, there's only like 4 of us, 3 of us. Actually, just 3 of us right here, and Sean joins us in just a minute. But not to get into the weeds with this particular ride, but the guy on the right, Patrick, he's really one of the fastest 40 plus guys in the entire state. That guy is just an animal. Of course, on my left, Kenneth, the Cambodian Batman. I don't need to say anything more about him. These are the hardcore guys that show up when it's 109, and I did think this helped pay off for me later. But anyway, let's get back to the season. So I only raced 2 times the entire season, and I've already posted up those videos on those particular days. It was the week after this particular group ride, and then the week after that. So in the first week of racing, 1 week after this ride, I did the B race. I had very low expectations. I was racing by myself without any teammates. And I was just hoping that I could stay in the bunch. And one way that you can judge your fitness is how are you doing relative to the other guys that you normally ride with on your group rides. If you're strong, and when in the past those strengths have paid off in terms of um, placing or winning or getting on the podium, then you think, okay, that's a good metric. I'm doing pretty well. But I didn't have that feeling on the rides that I've been doing. But I knew I was building a little bit of fitness. And so anyway, on that first B race, I don't need to go into all the details, but I won it. And last lap, I was on the strong young guy's wheel. He was going first into that last lap. I stayed on his wheel and I was able to win the sprint. That was really quite surprising to me. I've only won the B race or that level of race once before my entire career here, if you want to call it a career. But anyway, so it's not like I'm winning all the time. And then the next week, fresh off of that, I got dropped in the B race where my saddle came loose and I sat up. But I'd almost made it to the Fast Guys breakaway, the very select breakaway where all the placings were. I sat up right before I joined them. So that was, looking back a little bit encouraging that I kind of was one of the few to almost make it, if almost counts. Anyway, sitting up allowed me to rest a little bit because then I had some time before the 40 plus race started, and I actually won that. Unfortunately, I didn't have any footage, but that was a really fun race and tactical race. And again, going into the last lap, this time me on the front, tactically looking over my shoulder, waiting for the guys to attack, especially sprinter Brent, and was able to win the sprint from the front on that one. So wow, 2 weeks, 2 wins. That was completely unexpected. And one reason I didn't expect it because I never really put in the work or the training this past year. Uh, Not to the extent that I had in the past. And I don't know if I don't know exactly what that's a reflection of, but that's one thing I think that's worthwhile to discuss in this video about how much do you need to put in and what are you trying to achieve and what results do you want. So could it be that some people are training too much? Are they going too hard? Are they putting too much pressure on themselves? I think the answer could be yes. So I'll just quickly recap what I'd done in the many months prior to that. So last fall, so we're talking about the fall of 2021, after the season is over, I didn't race. I hadn't raced in 3 years, so it wasn't like I was recovering from racing, but I took it pretty casual, into the late fall. Friend invited me out, for the weekend at his place, at his ranch. Went out there. I didn't ride my bike. There's just things like that that I went camping with my son. Um, Stuff that I might have been a little bit more OCD about in terms of, sticking with my miles, my training, the time. Didn't really worry about it because I wasn't really so concerned about racing or being in shape. Also, during the winter, I stopped riding the A ride on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I started riding with the Bs. The Bs go slower. Now I kind of mostly sat on the back and tried to get in as much steady pacing as I could, but at a lower speed. Definitely less ups and downs, less 600-watt type intervals on the B ride. Uh, it was very different, and I did that for a good while. I want to say, I can't remember, but I might have done that for like 2 or 3 months. Nothing. That's something I hadn't done before, and so that was arguably a significant break because I know it was a break because I was not as fit and not as fast when I tried to come back from that. Another thing that I didn't do, I didn't really do any of the structured workouts on the trainer that I had done in years prior, where I add stuff in, trying to do those like 5-minute intervals, where you're seeing cross-eyed as you're doing those intervals and wondering why the heck you were even born. You're in so much pain. Didn't do any of that. Before these races, I'd had basically two-week vacations where one of the vacations I didn't do any riding at all. I didn't have a bike. The second vacation, I didn't ride very much. I did take a bike on that vacation, but I had one very difficult, somewhat epic attempt to ride during that time. It was my longest ride, 10 hours on the bike, and it was in a mountain biking situation. Prescott Circle Trail, 58 miles, 6,000 feet. I suffered a lot on that ride. I don't need to get into all the details of how and why I suffered, but I was able to finish that ride. Very little water. I didn't plan the water well, but anyway, that was a tough effort, and I think that probably helped my fitness. But I didn't do a lot of stuff that I normally would have done to really be on the sharp end. When I was going into that first race, a week after this ride, Exert said my FTP was about, my threshold power was like 225, I think it was saying. And so 225 for me is not good. That's like embarrassingly low. And that contributed to my sense of pessimism about my prospects going into the race. And also I thought just maybe just staying in the group, having not raced for 3 years, just get my sea legs under me. That was all I expected. And well, here's one thing about Exert. Now, some of you guys are not familiar with Exert, but Exert's another training platform and monitoring, tracking platform that one thing it does is based on your efforts, tells you approximately what your threshold power is based on their mathematical model, and I think it's pretty accurate. Anyway, if you don't do hard efforts for a very long time, you will not get a good estimate of what your FTP is. Another thing that was really different is I had a lot of mechanical trouble with my bike over the winter, and so I actually needed a new front chain ring. I'd worn out my chain ring, and eventually I had to replace. I had to replace my chain, of course. I do tend to replace my chain every once in a while, and I did replace my cassette. But I will tell you, if you're a sprinter type and your chain keeps popping, like ding, doesn't necessarily come off, but you try to put power down, it really saps your confidence. And even though I had replaced those things and I wasn't getting that, I still didn't have confidence to sprint, and so I'd actually not sprinted, done any kind of sprint for something like 6 months before I raced. I'd never done a sprint, which is unusual. If you want to be good at sprints, you better practice your sprints, and you better have hard, efforts. If you practice it, you will get better. So looking back, I wonder if some of this downtime was actually useful, instead of being at the sharp end all the time, going hard all the time. Do you really need to do that all the time? By the way, on this group ride here with these four of us now, I do get dropped. I was suffering. I was suffering big time. I think this is where I get dropped. So, and then it's just me. There goes Kenneth, and those guys are gone. Anyway, so I'll just throw it out there. Maybe you're training too much. You're training too hard. You're not getting enough recovery riding in. You're not doing those, LSD, long, slow distance. You're not building up your base. You're putting too much stress on your cardiovascular system. You're not giving your heart a rest during the off season. How many times have you been listening to these podcasts and stuff, and you hear about people who have an injury and they're forced to stop, and then they come back stronger because it's the first time they've had significant rest in a long time. So I'm just throwing it out there. Do please consider getting some rest, and sometimes being lazier in a strategic way and going slower might be to your advantage. And also, I think one thing it tells me is that I don't have to be at the very, very sharp end of efforts and planning and thinking about my fitness to just go out and do a local crit. I might be successful with 80% effort compared to the normal 100% effort. Obviously I would be better at the 100% effort. So, I think I can't remember what my peak FTP via exert was when I was going better, but I want to say it was well over 300. I mean, not a lot over 300, but it might have been like 310 or maybe a little bit less than that. In the 300s, definitely. And weighing less too. And so here I am weighing more, out of shape, lower FTP. By the way, after the racing was done, those 2 races, I want to say that Exert estimated my FTP to be over 290. So again, whether that's accurate or not, it's a useful metric for me to be able to track my relative fitness, even if it's not perfectly accurate. Saying that with the efforts that I had done, that my fitness was going up. Now the reason why I didn't do more than 2 races is because I got injured. Just fooling around. I mean, I wasn't fooling around, but I was just riding at White Rock Lake. Did this little turn. There was a little gravel I didn't see, and just going 14 miles an hour, that little bit of gravel in that turn from transitioning from a little downhill to a left-hander on the flat. It was like rolling on marbles. My bike just instantly went down and put out my hand and hurt my wrist. Luckily, it wasn't broken, but was significantly injured, and still haven't fully recovered from it more than 2 months later. But I'm able to ride my bike now. And but anyway, I wasn't able to race in the crits after that, but I had a good time helping the promoter run the crit and help out there with getting people checked in, ringing the bell, getting the payouts to people and everything like that. That was fun. So learning a little bit more about the business side of how racing occurs and what they have to think about, what they have to do, what they have to worry about. So anyway, I hope that's some food for thought in terms of thinking about what's useful for actually getting faster and being successful with quotes. What is successful? Obviously I'm not at the high end of racing. I'm not I'm a Cat 3, I'm a Masters Cat 3, and I don't have these super high aspirations, but just getting out into a race, for fun. It's my hobby, a hobby. I think that's fine, and you don't have to be on a Superman schedule to do that. I also will tell you that I felt like the 2 days of racing, 2 weeks in a row, there were significant gains in fitness that I did there. I was feeling like I was getting much stronger after those basically 3.5 races in 2 days, separated by a week. So racing to where the racing gets you fitter is something that you can certainly do. Former teammate Bobby, man, he just kept peaking towards the end of the season after I was already hurt. He didn't seem to be much of a, well, how do I say this without being offensive? He wasn't at his top end when I was racing in those 2 weeks. I mean, I've seen him at his top end, and he wasn't there, but he just, kept racing over the next 3-4 weeks, man. He was on it, and multiple podiums, and I think he was just putting in the work. I looked at his Strava miles; they're about double my miles. So again, it wasn't a big mile year for me this year. I think right now I'm at like close to 4,000 miles. I think just over 4,000 miles for the year. So he was basically double that relative to my miles as of a month ago. So anyway, you just put in the work, especially the racing. You know, you get that. There's nothing like that top end that you get from really, really going hard in races that can start to pay you back and get you faster. So, sorry for the lack of humor, wit, and everything else that you've come to expect from this amazing channel. I will work on that. This was straight and dry. I was thinking today, uh, Mike Reiner on the ticket. You know, he just came back on the new station 97.1, The Freak. And if you guys don't know Dallas radio, sports radio, he started the ticket with some other guys and recently retired. And then suddenly comes out of retirement and says, I'm starting a new station. I'm taking on the old station. And says, yeah, it's just something I wanted to do. And, isn't that why we're doing all this stuff? It's something you want to do. You feel the drive to do it, and come what may, do your riding, do your racing. Put out my dumb video that no one's going to watch. Who cares? We're just doing it for fun. So never take advice from a Masters Cat 3. I think that's the best advice I've given in this. And, some of you may be thinking, like, is this his strategy to make me slower? That's something you need to think about, Think about that for a second. Am I trying to make you slower? But I'm actually telling what I think, which is you probably have more leeway in the way that you conduct things in taking a few breaks, not stressing out about things, not doing a million different trainer intervals, and all the stuff that some of you are doing might not be as necessary as you think. And some other stuff that would be super helpful, resting more, going slower and longer at times, you're not doing, you might want to try it. So that's all I got. I will leave you guys to it. Don't have much time for video commentary these days, but I thought I'd just put a short one out to recap the year here. So some thoughts I've been pondering. Take care. Be well. Later.